So my name is Dr. Vance Ginn. I'm the director of our Center for Economic Prosperity and senior economist here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the panelists for being here. We're going to have a great discussion. Now, let me ask you this. Do any of you have higher property taxes? Are any of you feeling burdened about your property taxes? Just a few of you. All right. Well, to lay the ground, maybe all of you, I guess I should say. So to lay the groundwork, look, Texas brings in about $60 billion in property taxes across this great state. There are a lot of things that Texas gets right. We don't have an income tax. Thank the Lord.
Amen.
Yes. We have less regulation overall. We tend to spend less than other states do, which is why we can have lower taxes and things of that nature. And look, over the last decade, Texas has created 22% of all new jobs created across the whole United States. 22%. There's a lot we're doing right. But property taxes, as each one of you have seen, have continued to skyrocket. Over the last 20 years, from 1998 to 2017, the comptroller just came out with his biennial property tax report, showed that overall property taxes are up 212%. If you look at population growth plus inflation, a good measure of the average taxpayer's ability to pay over that period, is up 114%. So in other words, property tax is up about 2 times as fast as the average taxpayer's ability to pay, which is why many of us feel like we're paying so much in property taxes. And those overall property taxes are broken down into the school portion. School maintenance and operation is about half of your property tax burden. You have the cities and the counties and special purpose districts. And we're going to talk about some of that today. And there are a lot of good plans that are out there. One thing I wanted to point your attention to is that at TexasPolicy.com, at our website, we've got a tool that shows what could happen within our tax plan that we've been putting out so far. We're just limiting spending and lowering property taxes. You can put in your property tax bill, and it'll show you how much savings you could get over the next decade. Something to look at. So we're going to have some good discussion today about a lot of different plans. Is property taxes even the best form of taxation? You know, are people's property rights maybe being violated? Those are things that we needed to think about as well. And so I'm really looking forward to this discussion. It's one of the key issues that we're going to hear. I mean, the statewide leaders, Governor Abbott has made this a key topic, school finance and property tax relief. So has the Lieutenant Governor and Speaker Bonin as well. So this is a key issue that each and every one of us care a lot about and want to see something done this session. This is going to be the session, right, guys? Yeah. So we're really looking forward to it, and thank you again for all of you being here. So let me introduce each one of our great panelists. So Dr. John Diamond is a Kelly Fellow in Public Finance and Director of the Center for Public Finance at Rice University's Baker Institute. He is also the CEO of Tax Policy Advisors, LLC. He served on the Joint Committee on Taxation from 2000 to 2004 and as a forum editor of the National Tax Journal from 2009 to 2016. Current research focuses on the economic effects of corporate tax reform, the economic and distributional effects of fundamental tax reform, taxation and housing values, public sector pensions, and various other tax and expenditure policy issues. That was a mouthful. Please give me a round of applause for Dr. John Diamond. Next to Dr. Diamond is Senator Paul Bettencourt. Paul Bettencourt was first elected to the Senate in 2014 and represents Senate District 7. He previously served 10 years as the Harris County tax assessor and collector, so you know a little bit about property taxes, right? Just a little, yeah, okay.
$5 billion worth.
Yes. In his first legislative session, served as the chief Senate sponsor on 25 bills that the legislature approved, including his amendment to SB 1760 that requires a 60% supermajority within a taxing jurisdiction to increase property taxes. The key reform. Governor Abbott recognized him as an architect of tax relief, and Lieutenant Governor Patrick appointed him to chair the Senate Select Committee on Property Tax Reform and Relief. He is also CEO of Bettencourt Tax Advisors, LLC, a tax consulting company in Houston. Please give him a round of applause. Next to Senator Bettencourt is Judge Glen Whitley. He presides over Tarrant County Commissioner's Court. He's a member of the University of North Texas System Board of Regents. He was first elected to the Hearst Euless Bedford Independent School District Board of Trustees in 1993. He was later elected as Tarrant County Commissioner in 1996, and then as Tarrant County Judge in 2006. He is past president of the National Association of Counties and of the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and past chairman of the Regional Transportation Council and the Texas Conference on Urban Counties. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, there's Representative Drew Springer. He's a state representative for House District 68. He's a lifelong conservative who fights to preserve rural values, promote economic development, and undo regulations that inhibit rural Texas. He graduated from the University of North Texas with a bachelor's degree in accounting, spent 15 years working for a rail car company as an accountant, and eventually as president overseeing 3 divisions. Then he also eventually left to join his father's financial service business, where he has specialized in agricultural managed futures for the last decade. Thank you for being here. Please give them all a round of applause. So, the way I like to start things out, am I on here? No? Hello? Now I'm on. All right, good. So we're going to have a great discussion here today, and what I'd like to first do is have you just kind of go over, give your opening remarks. So I'll start with you, Dr. Diamond.
So I'm going to show you a few slides. I'm looking forward. They'll all be giving you details. They know more policy than I've probably forgotten.
We'll find out.
You probably know more policy than I know anything. But I want to give you a look forward of what would happen if we did reform the property tax system. And particularly, I actually did some work for Vance, scoring their proposal, so to speak. And so I've got a bunch of slides basically that, well, obviously I just have one slide. It actually is my favorite slide. But,
you need to have your picture there, John.
There we go. Okay, so there's this model, the Diamond-Zodra model. I recommend it. I could go through all the details. It's a large-scale computational general equilibrium model. It's been used worldwide to do this type of analysis. I get hired by CBO, Treasury, New Zealand Treasury. I go on and on. Ernst & Young, PwC. This is, maybe it's this one.
They turn in the back.
Yeah, keep turning. We're going to just pretty much go through to the, and so here we'll stop here. So I'm going to show you 2 things. I'm going to show you 2 results. One is the TPPF proposal, where they reduce spending each year. They reduce the growth in spending, not an outright reduction in spending. They reduce spending growth. They use that reduction in spending to lower property taxes. In fact, they use it to eliminate the M&O property tax in 12 years.
The school M&O.
School M&O. And so the second one I will show you is just, instead of reducing spending, let's leave spending the same and let's just swap the property tax for the sales tax. And so we can move to the next slide. Only got 3 minutes, so we'll just go to the general results. So this is the reduction in the spending growth. I want to give you a flavor for what would happen if we did reform the system. And so top line is GDP, state gross domestic product, or gross domestic income. You'd see potentially an 8% increase in gross domestic income from eliminating the school M&O property tax and financing that with less growth in government spending. And we could break that apart by the components. Consumption would go up 1.5%. Total capital would be up 4.6%. Total wages go up by 0.8%. I used a bunch of really moderate assumptions. Like, I always try to underestimate the results when I do work like this. So for example, I had a fixed labor supply population, which is an absurd assumption. If you lower property tax and capital flows into Texas, labor's almost certainly going to follow. And so to assume that labor is constant, and then it actually goes down because as people get richer, they consume more consumption goods. They also consume more leisure, because that's a consumption good. The more money we have, the more we want to consume other goods, and the more we want to consume our leisure time. And so that's why you get the negative. If we modeled it right and we allowed labor to flow in with all the new capital, these results would even be larger. You can see here government consumption goes down, and the school M&O property tax is eliminated, which leads to about a 35% reduction in state property taxes, state and local property taxes. Next slide is just very similar results when you do the same experiment, but instead of financing the reduction in property taxes with reduced spending growth, we finance them with the sales tax. We increase the sales tax to get these results. There's a caveat to these results. This is requiring an increase in the state sales tax of about 5 percentage points. So about $10 billion is made up through growth effects, so we get higher taxes in other areas. The rest of it has to be made up by an increase in the state sales tax. Part of the problem is the state sales tax isn't an efficient tax, so there would be distortion losses of increasing the rate. Some of those are in there. The most important one that's not in there is the fact that about 50% of the base is business purchases. That gives you a flavor. I think that's all I wanted to do, and I'm going to pass it down.
All right, we'll have more questions later. Senator Betancourt.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming, and let's just state the obvious, okay? As values go up, property tax rates have to come down. See, this is Aggie math, okay? We've been holding hearings on the Senate side and talking about this for almost 3 years, and I'm really happy to see the already great, what I think is cooperation developing between the House, the Senate, and the governor about really recognizing that we need school finance reform and property tax relief, because the two are right. Give them a big hand for that, okay? It's quite a departure from the last speaker, who was not a fan of property tax relief. And I'm just laying it out because we've got a chance to actually do something this session. Now, let me tell you the magnitude of the problem, and I think we've got some slides, but this is like truth or consequences. I don't even know what version they're going to put up here in a second. The average home in Dallas County has had a 33.6% increase in property taxes from 2013 to 2017. And if you don't believe me, trust the Dallas Morning News, because it's their calculation. So that means that all the bills, the school, the county, the city, and all the special districts went up 33.6%. It brought the average home to over $5,000 a year in property taxes. Now, not to be outdone, in Harris County, we actually had a higher percentage, 37.4% increase from 2013 to 2017. But we were started a little lower, so we ended up at about $4,900 and change for the average home. Now, that's just the increases in the residential side, okay? Now, for the business owners out there, they would love to get an average of 8, 9, 10% a year increase, because most of the business owners are seeing a 15 to 20% increase. Now, I want you to project that if you owned a shopping center and you had to keep, jacking up everybody's rent, you're going to have a problem keeping your tenants. Now, here's another thing we need to recognize. The state bird of Texas is no longer the mockingbird, it's the construction crane, okay? And look, and just driving in from Houston, you're surrounded by it. But this is everywhere. It's in Tarrant County, it's in Dallas County, it's in Collin County. Go around the Horn to Montgomery and Harris and Fort Bend, come back to I-35 corridor, and there's, I'm not sure that you can ever get out of sight on I-35 from San Antonio to DFW, unless you're really in a rural area, you don't see some construction activity. So because things are exploding, values are increasing. And what has to happen is tax rates have to come down. Now here's my third thing, and I've been arguing for this on the Commission for Public School Finance. We've been in meetings for over a year. The state has to stop Robin Hood, okay? It's got to, okay? We have to wean off of it, because it's not just recapture, which we'll talk about here in a second. It's the fact that as the values go up, the state basically sends less into public education. And no offense, we're hooked on it, or we're going to be really hooked on it if we can't stop it now. So, well, thank you. I appreciate it, because we have to recognize the obvious. School taxes have to come down too, okay? Because if values go up and school tax rates stay the same, what happens to your tax bill? All right, so let's do a quick survey of the audience, Vince. Okay, Vance, if your tax bill goes up 10%, your value goes up 10%, and your tax rates stay the same, what happens to your tax bill? It goes up 10%, okay? So we have to talk about the school side too. So all year, and Drew knows because he's been watching these hearings, I've been talking about weaning off of Robin Hood. We have to change the way we're funding schools. But we do. And so the bottom line with this is that to tell you how bad of a problem it's going to be, if we take no action at all, here's what's going to happen. We've got 400 school districts in recapture right now, which is AKA Robin Hood, even though Robin Hood is more complex because it's basically the entire school funding formula system. But 14 years ago, there was $1 billion of recapture, which is money coming out of local school districts spread around everywhere else. Well, there's a great graph, which I was hoping we could put up from the governor's office. I see David Shoemaker here because he made the presentation to our committee. The number is now $2 billion. Okay, well, you're thinking, it's not too bad. We've doubled that in 14 years. We can survive it. Well, we can't, because by 2023, that number is going to be $5 billion. See, these calculations are kind of sensitive to once you turn on certain inversion points, for lack of a better description. And so we're going to have $5 billion worth of recapture. Now, that's politically almost impossible to survive. Plus, it's morally wrong, and I'm going to do everything I can to stop it, because we have to realize that the best tax system is, as values go up, tax rates come down on schools, on cities, on counties, and especially on special districts. Because if I had my chart here, and Vance knows this, and the doctor does too, that all special districts have grown in tax levies over the last, since 2006, by over 100%. Now, here's the bottom line. You're paying it, okay? And we have to recognize the obvious is that you can't keep up with payments that go up 2.5, 3 times your tax pay, your personal income increase, or specifically your wages. And so with that, well, if we get some more slides back up, or I'll just cheat off of Springer slides here in a little bit.
We'll have other time. Thank you. Judge Whitley?
Okay, first what I want to do, I spend most of my time when I go around talking with folks, explaining to them what county government is about. And so what I want to do is to begin by giving you just a little bit of background. And I want to tell you that really since we became a state, since Texas became a state, the state leaders have recognized that because of the size and the diversity of our state, and because they believed then, and as I think we believe now, that the best decisions are made by local elected officials closest to the people, that in order to fulfill their state constitutional obligations, that they would form partnerships with basically schools and counties to provide those services. The schools obviously educate our children. The counties to administer the jails, to administer the court systems, to allow the elected district attorney in each county to prosecute criminals, basically to collect vital information, to record deeds within the county courthouse, to take care of emergency management, to conduct statewide and national elections. And in order to do that, basically with the schools, and we all know this, that's funded by a combination of money from the state, i.e. GR revenue, and from the counties, property taxes. And that has varied, and from time to time, again, it's a very complicated formula. And right now, it is slanted much more toward the local property tax than it is toward the state. And so, if we're going to make, and I'm not interested really in relief or reform, I'm interested in reduction of property tax. And most of us understand that within the urban areas, we're looking at 55% of our tax bill is schools, and in the rural areas, it's even a little bit higher than that. So if we're going to make a meaningful reduction, it's going to be in the area of your school property tax. Now in the counties, what the state has said is we're going to give you a limited ability to charge fines and fees, and the rest of the services that we have legislated and told you to perform, we're going to pay for through property tax. And so that's the way that's worked. Now we're a big state, and every county, I tell everybody, the only thing that is exactly the same in the 254 counties that we have in this state from Loving County with approximately 70 people to Harris County with over 4.6 million people is that we each have a commissioner's court that's made up of 4 commissioners and a county judge. And that's about where the similarities end. To give you just an even better example, if you were to combine the population of Dallas and Tarrant County, it would be about 4.6 million people, which is similar to the size of Harris County. Well, in Dallas and Tarrant County combined, we have approximately 60,000 citizens who live in the unincorporated area of those counties. All the rest of them live in the cities, and they receive services from the cities. In Harris County, over 2 million of the citizens live in the unincorporated area. Roads and bridges, which is one of the things in the unincorporated area that counties are responsible for. If you were to take Dallas, Tarrant, Bear, and Travis and combine them and look at all of the unincorporated miles in those 4, it's almost half of what Harris County has. Now, I know today we're to talk about property taxes, but I think, again, before we get into a discussion about a specific category of tax, we need to look at kind of where we are overall. The Brookings Institute in 2015 said that Texas was 29th we ranked 29th among the other states as far as the collection of state and local tax per capita. In 2016, that moved to 30th. And so I think one of the first discussions that we have to have is that based upon the quantity and the quality of the services that are provided, are we happy at being 29th or 30th? We're moving in a lower direction. So does that mean we want less services or less quality of those services? Or might we want to move a little bit higher in order to improve things? And we've talked about the November election said that as a general public, I don't think we're satisfied with public education. Now, some will argue that that's not the quality or that it's not how much we're spending, but it's how we're funding what we are spending. But I will tell you this morning, in this very audience, the speaker said we need, twice he said, we need to put more dollars into public education. So I think that's something we've got to look at. Now, once we determine whether we're satisfied or we want to put less or more, we then have to determine of the category of taxes that we have, how are we going to spread those dollars among the various categories? And in Texas, we know that primarily that's property tax, sales tax, and yes, there's some in the form of severance and there's some in the form of gasoline tax. But heaven forbid, we, like the plague, we have avoided, and I pray always will avoid, the pit. And what is a pit? Personal income tax. And I think that that's something we'll always want to do. But once we've said, okay, there are the places we're going to look for, then we can decide whether we want to shift something from property tax to state sales tax or to severance tax or to a gasoline tax to bring in those funds. And then once we've determined that, then we get into looking at the individual category, property tax, sales tax. And I was told this morning, a group spoke, and they said that if you look at the categories and you look at the amount of exemptions that over time we have approved, that basically on an annual basis we have approved $60 billion worth of exemptions. So when we talk about sales tax, someone said, well, maybe we raise sales tax. Well, we might not have to raise sales tax. We might just have to, as the state does in many of its agencies, on a regular basis, they sunset. They look at agencies and determine whether or not those exemptions, those exclusions, are still necessary and or do they need to be changed a little bit. Yeah. So now what we've done is we've looked within the category and we've said, first off, here's what we think we need to provide the quantity and quality of services. Here's how we want to divide that among the categories, and then within each category, we can do that. And so I think as we begin to approach this discussion, as well as other that I know you have on your agenda, I think that's one of the things we should look at and not just solely focus on one without looking at how it pertains to overall.
All right. Thank you, sir. Representative?
Thank you. Drew Springer, House District 68. A little more about, I have 10% of the state of Texas land mass. It'd be bigger than 72 countries. So we have some of those, a little bit different than my counterparts in Harris County. But 2 sessions now on Ways and Means. Met with the speaker this afternoon and said, I want to continue to work on this. Because I have. I've followed Senator Bentoncourt's hearings. I ran into the lieutenant governor on Sunday and said, hey, I've been listening to Paul for the last 2.5 hours. And he looked at me like, what's wrong with you?
Okay, you're
And I
good-
said I
you're
was
good
listening
tax
to his
guy.
hearing.
Yeah, right.
And that's why we knew we were talking about this morning from the gentleman from that city who had basically done what I've seen so many do, is as appraisals go up, sit there and say, we held your tax rate same, so we haven't raised your taxes, which is a lie. And so, we've continued to work on that, and everybody's got plans as we go through. We heard the 210% number earlier. This is what that looks like by category from your counties, your cities, and your schools, as well as those special purpose districts. I will say, if you don't like special purpose districts, in my 25,000 square miles, I do not have one single special purpose district.
That's God's country. Let's go.
You've got a few more than that, don't you?
I just got a few more. And this is really what it breaks down as a percentage overall, and as the judge and everybody has said, schools make up about half of that. I've said that in all my town halls. I don't hide it. I says, as your appraisal goes up, we raise more money. It comes into the state. We have to put less of state dollars in. It's the same taxpayer, by the way, both local and state. You're the same people out there that are paying that. We've used it for primarily health care and health and human services. It's gone from a small percentage to roughly half of what we put in, or I should say, it's about the equal to what we do with from the school standpoint. So now we're about that 60-40, 62-38, whatever we want to call it. And we need to look at ways of moving that back down. Judge hit a lot of the things I've really been working on, which is we've done $60 billion worth of exemptions. What do you mean when you say an exemption from that? 1997, we gave everybody a tax break. We said, you don't have to pay tax on aspirin and ibuprofen anymore, over-the-counter medicine. That's $500 million a biennium. We could use that money to buy down property taxes in that M&O rate. There's some other things that we don't tax today that we need to probably look at how we do that. As technology changes, we now have Wayfair that's coming in. That's about $250 million a year. We need to use that new revenue not to grow government, but to buy down property taxes. Vape juice, that's a new thing, and I'm friends with the guy who is now the government relations for Juul that has 80% of the market. Most other states charge a 5 to 10 cent per milliliter on there. There's some additional money. We can come through there, we can work through these categories, and we can find a way of buying down that M&O piece of the school to make it more in line to back to at least that 50-50, if not get it 60% from the state and 40% over from the local standpoints on that. Look forward to having that conversation on how we do that, but it is definitely one of those that we cannot continue to ask people to pay and basically feel like they're renting their houses. And that's the message we continue to get. And if we don't fix it this session, I think we're in deep trouble. We've got a great opportunity ahead of us. The big three are all working fantastically together on that. The Senate and the House, not only did I listen to them while I'm driving down, but we had a meeting this morning with 14 county judges to discuss how can we do that. And if and when the state buys down that M&O, how can we make sure the cities and counties don't backfill that? And that's when we're talking about revenue triggers. And when do we trigger elections? Do we go back to the way it was before inflation took off at 5% when we moved it to 8%? And the other thing, and I think it's really clear from my side of the chamber, is we don't think that citizens should have to petition their government when we think we've gone too far.
Right.
Now, and
Drew, let's just do an automatic election. What's this petition nonsense all
exactly.
about?
We can do an automatic election. And one of the things that used to also be the case is, you know, our local, all of our officials were in a 2-year cycle. And so I've had people tell me, well, they can throw me out of the city council. And I said, no, because it takes 6 years. You can only get a third every 2 years to be able to do that on certain cycles. I know our county judges and commissioners, it's a 4-year cycle. And we've talked about saying, you know, do we change those to back to where everybody runs on a 2-year cycle from those standpoints?
Well, and I might add that there are some cities, Fort Worth, Arlington, that vote the whole council at the same time. So
And
not
they went
everybody
they
is
went
on
from a
that.
2 to 3. You're exactly right. And I remember Betsy Price said we need to go from 2 years to 3 years because some commissioners need to vote on things they shouldn't have to face the voters on as quickly. And I think that's part of that problem.
So Representative Springer, so thank you all for the opening remarks. Let me start back with you. With your idea here, basically what you're trying to do is broaden the base in the sales tax in order to replace the school maintenance and operation property tax. Is that right?
A percentage. If you go we can definitely look at all the way. I think there's a reasonable period that maybe it's a 50% homestead exemption, maybe it's a 50% buy down of the total M&O where you go from $1 to 50 cents and compressing that rate and doing that. Yes, you can get to 100. You do a lot of changes and people may say you reach a point in tax policy that drives businesses, employers out of the state, I think would be bad tax policy.
Yeah.
But you know, one thing I want to throw in here and at least begin to get you thinking in terms of this. We talk a lot about percentages. But how many of you deposit percentages or write checks in percentages? When you look at it from a dollar perspective, yes, from 2007 to 2017, county tax collection in the state of Texas went up about 70%. On a per capita basis, that's $93. At the same time, personal income went up about 30%. On a per capita basis, that's over $10,000. So let's remember we write checks in dollars, not in percentages, and that again, I want to go back to where do we need to be? Are we happy with 30? Do we want to be 40? Do we want to be 28? What do we expect to get for that? And I think that's the starting point. And then I am all for a redistribution from maybe property tax to sales tax or to something else, or a more equal spread on that deal. But again, we pay in dollars, not in percentages.
If I could.
Yeah.
You know, Judge, I don't mean to disagree with you because I'm not sure about the per capita stats because I haven't seen them. But the stats in Dallas and Houston are that the average home just in 4 years was paying $3,600 in taxes. They're now paying $5,000. That's a $1,400 increase on the average home in 4 years. And let's say that for argumentation purposes, county is 20% of the number. Okay.
16.
So, well, okay, but you know, some counties are a little higher because I'm going to actually credit your county here in a second. But we take that, so that's about $280 more per year per household. So when we talk per capita, we got to think who's writing the check because the household owners are writing the check. The individual kids aren't paying the tax. Now, let me tell you what's really happening on county. And see, look, we got a spending problem here too. Yeah. Okay?
That was my next big point. I was going to ask about that.
Vance, so ask it and I'll give you some data here, okay? But
Go ahead,
all right,
sir.
good, okay.
Senator.
Because Tarrant County is going to end up as the soft landing on this, okay? Harris County, total taxes levied in 4 years, okay? 51% increase. That's over $400 million just for their county, not their hospital district, not their flood control district, et cetera. I mean, because they've got 3 taxing jurisdictions alone, actually got 4. But that's 51% more money in 4 years. There's no population and economic growth statistic that justifies a 51% increase in government in 4 years. It just doesn't exist, okay? Now,
What was that in dollars?
411 million, okay?
I mean, per capita.
In per capita? Okay, it's a 51% increase. They were taking in roughly 1.1 billion. They're now at 1.75 over that period of time. I mean, these are huge magnitude increases. Bexar County, 37% increase in 4 years. Well, they're down closer to the 9% simple interest. That's all they grew at, okay? Dallas County, running a close third at 33%. Again, hundreds of millions of dollars, nearly $300 million more, okay? Then we get to the garden spot, okay?
Thank you.
No, we're here.
I know.
No, Travis County, okay? Shocking, okay? Now, I'm going to say one thing, I'm teasing him. It's shocking because to keep their levy growth down to only 17.6%, their commissioner's court cut their tax rate by nearly 12 pennies. See, as values go up, you got to cut the tax rate. And the garden spot was Tarrant County. They had a 15.2% increase in the levy, but they only cut their tax rate by a penny. Now, so I can't yell at the judge because he cut his tax rate, all right? Yeah. But I will tell you, and Vance, I mean, we had a guy from Mount Bellevue come to our last hearing, just in late November. He walked in and said, "What you're proposing is the end of the world." Okay, you're going to you're going to basically starve out cities and counties. He didn't even have his own data. We asked him, "How much did you raise taxes last year?" He didn't know. This is the general manager of a city sent by the Texas Municipal League to go testify at the Committee on Property Tax Reform. Now, my crack staff, which is over there, okay, all right, okay, basically got on the internet and looked at his own financial statements, and the number was like 6.5%. He wasn't even hitting the 8% rollback rate, but he was in there saying it's the death of civilization. Now, we got to, listen, I'm willing to recognize the obvious that we have to lower school tax rates too. We'll talk about that later because the commission actually had new money for both new programs and for tax relief. But it is incumbent upon the elected officials to stop lying to their people that they're not raising taxes because they're not raising the tax rate. And if I hear that in the next set of hearings, okay, we're going to post those things on Facebook and interject them into their cities or their counties because I'm sick and tired of people lying about it. If we can talk about Robin Hood and the need to wean off of it, everybody needs to bring everything to the table so we can get this problem fixed. Yeah. Sorry, Vance, I got on a roll. My apologies.
No, it's all right, quite all right. Anyway, you bring up the good point, though, about spending. Spending is what ultimately drives taxes. I mean, when you think about where taxes come from, first you have to think about, okay, what public services do we want from our government? There's probably also going to be some rent seeking, some voter trying to get votes along the way. Those things go into it. Then you think about how much is that going to cost? That gets you your spending. And then you figure out what's the most efficient form of taxation to fund that spending. And, something that I think about too is are property taxes really the most efficient form of taxation? If we want to have an economic juggernaut in the state of Texas, what form of taxation should we have?
That's a softball for the doctor.
It's a consumption tax.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a property tax. So the economic literature is very clear that the property tax is part excise tax, part pure tax on capital. So the part of the tax that's kind of equals the national average, you're just taxing capital. The part that's above that causes capital to locate in different jurisdictions, therefore increasing deadweight loss.
But what about the issue though? If you have, because I know Judge Whitley, he's talked about having a three-legged stool, and if we don't have an income tax, get rid of a property tax, let's say, now you only have one-legged stool, right? And could that make it to where we are depending on a more volatile source of revenue?
Or pushing us toward that pit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
It's coming back from the other side of the angle.
we're
I
advocating
agree with
just-
you. We need a consumption tax overall.
yeah, well, I'm just saying we shift more, we can shift more to that. You asked what's the most efficient,
Yeah.
and I'm saying this consumption tax is more efficient. I will leave it to the voters to decide exactly what they want to do.
Sure.
I'm not advocating complete eradication of the property tax. Obviously, we need more than a single source of revenue. We still have others. But I want to fight back against this idea that we need to make this decision about how much we're going to spend before this financing decision, because what I want to know before I commit to spending more money is how they're going to spend the money. I don't want to spend the money on a non-competitive education system. If we're going to stick with the same education system we have now, I absolutely don't want to spend more money.
You know, and I guess
I don't want to spend more money on public pensions that are going to default us and drive us into bankruptcy and drive tax rates up later. So when we have responsible government, I'll be willing to spend more money. But the government I see now, they need more constraint, not more leeway.
I guess the one
This is getting good.
the one point I would make, and let's talk about education, because right now we're ranked at about 42nd in funding. And if you look at the 4th and 8th grade math and science test results, we're at about 31st. So schools, teachers, funded at 42nd, ranked at 31st. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Perryman has said we're number one as far as business, but that we've got a problem with quality of life and we have a problem with education. And I'm not satisfied at being 31st out of 50 states as far as where our students rank in education. Now, whether that means that more money solves that problem, I'm not going to say it does, but I will say that you look at Dallas ISD, they threw a lot more money the last 4 years, and they've moved from a C to a B. The percentages that is being spent between instruction, administration, and the various areas has changed by less than 1% over that 10-year period of time. So there's not been a significant movement in that area. And so, again, what I'm just saying is, yes, we may have a spending problem, but our spending, again, is ranked 30th. So you can look at it however you want to look. We're 30th. So do we want to provide the same level of services, less, continue? We move down. And maybe that's the way we want to continue to move. But it still is dollars. And you mentioned that, okay, that child isn't paying the $93 in county tax. That child's also not earning that $10,000 in personal income. So when you're looking at it and trying to compare, what I'm saying is per capita is a way to do that. And on a per capita basis, income from 2007 to 2017 has gone up by $10,000 per capita. A lot more people coming into the area. County tax, and even by what you're saying is school and others, if you put all that together, it's not going to have gone up by more than probably $1,000 per capita. Now, on a family of four, that's $4,000.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is, but $40,000 of income is a lot of money, too.
Okay, but, you know, Judge, I unfortunately, I don't
Those are
think we-
comptroller
Yeah,
numbers.
we'll have questions from the audience afterwards.
Those are
just
comptroller
soon.
numbers.
Okay.
You know, one thing is, yeah, we can be 30th in that, and we're in the top 5 in a graduation rate. We are addressing it by realizing that as kids go on, we're doing a 30 by 60 because we know we need more kids with a certification or a college associate or a 4-year degree. But I'm just a simple little country boy, and I try to put things in a simple way. You got 20 kids in a class, and that's probably low on the average of the state of Texas. And we give $11,000. Let me rephrase that. Y'all give $11,000 to put a roof over their head and pay a teacher and educate them. That's $220,000 a classroom. How can we not pay a teacher $75,000 and put a roof over their head and have a better results as far as their scoring and aptitude to go to work? Now, we have a challenge in Texas that it drives me crazy to hear all these Northeast elites talk about how our education is. Let's put the Mexican border right against them, because we educate every kid in Texas, no matter what. And yes, it is a challenge, and we are trying to do our best in that challenge, and we need to do better every single year, and we work on doing better every time we do that. But those 5.3 million kids that are in our public school system, and I also get tired, and I heard some of the bigger cities say, we're mad about Robin Hood. And I'm sitting here going, you're counting Robin Hood, $1 you send to the state of Texas that we then send back to your big city because those kids chose to go to a public school called a charter school. And they're counting that as Robin Hood, and I don't think they should.
If I could ask my staff,
Okay.
did we have those TEA slides, guys, that show the shifts? Can you bring them up for a second? That's the Dallas Morning News calculations, by the way. Go back one if you could. Okay. That shows you the actual increase by, and this is Dallas Morning News. So needless to say, this is not Paul Betancourt putting up numbers. This is one of my more strident critics, actually, on property taxes. That you can see that we were at $3,700 for an average family. Okay. And again, families pay taxes, per capita kids don't. And then you go to $5,000 over that. So that in Dallas County, that's about a $1,300 increase over that period of time. Click ahead and see if we can find those TEA slides real fast, because we've got data. That's the one for Harris County that shows all the taxing jurisdictions and the spread. The ones that cut taxes are in the lower area. The ones that don't cut their tax rates are in the higher. Next. And again, they were at 37.5. They went to 4,900, but they started at 3,500, so that's about a $1,400 increase. Very consistent data across the state. And but I want to say this importantly: if we can get the TEA sides, keep clicking forward to find them. When you look at the public finance of public schools, actually Dallas ISD is actually done very well. They have a program called ACE where they took their money and figured out how to pay teachers more. And fascinatingly, it's based upon performance. Gee, good teachers get more money, okay? Shocking concept, okay? But an important one, okay? Lieutenant Governor's already talked about raising the base salaries for teachers. But the commission report talks about, again, about performance-based pay and also performance-based outcomes. Yeah. There are 98% low social economic high schools that are involved with P-TECH and Promise, where Dallas ISD works with their community college and American Airlines and IBM, and they go into the schools and they help the graduation rates in what was the worst performing high schools in Dallas, and astonishingly positive numbers. So when we work together and have leadership, you get good results. Now, quite frankly, as a Houstonian, Big D is kicking H-Town's butt, because right now I've got a board of HISD that hurls racial epithets at each other. I've got HCC trustees in jail, okay? And of course, nobody wants to cooperate under that circumstance, all right? Because businesses wouldn't send money into that type of lack of leadership. Now, one more, I want to show you these two pie charts. Very important, because there's been so much disinformation out there. This is the all-in of all dollars spent in public education in Texas, okay? The big piece of the pie is local property taxes, okay? And the next piece of the pie is state, and then the green is federal, and then the yellow is recapture. So 10 years ago, local property taxes were 52%. Everything else was 48%. Shocking, in 2012, the local share went down to 46%. Why? Because of the federal stimulus from the Obama administration.
The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act.
That's it, right. Raised the federal share to nearly 13%. And when that went away, okay, the Fed share dropped to 10%, the state shares dropped to 36%, but the actual local share is 50%. So what you hear is not right, okay? These are actual all dollars in counted by TEA, federal, state, and local. 50% of local and 50% everything else. Now, I think we need to freeze that chart.
But wouldn't the recapture be in there too? Because that's property tax.
Yeah, no, recapture's in there too. That's
So it would be
2.8%. Yeah.
53%.
No, well, but that's money we take to redistribute.
But it's property taxes
I know, but
that you're
that's-
redistributing.
Yeah, but Glenn, if you read the proposal, you know that what we're trying to do is cut recapture, and we're trying to freeze it or actually reduce it.
And I'm all for
okay.
that, but on that slide, property tax, that 2.8 is property tax.
Sure, of course it is. It's money that comes in that we, to the state, that we redistribute. That's why we need to wean off of it, okay? Now, but these are the real numbers, okay? And it's important for everybody to know because what you hear is not always the facts.
So one thing that we've been working on at the foundation is to figure out a way to lower property taxes. And what we have out there is to have cities, counties, and special purpose districts have an automatic rollback election of 2.5%, which is what the governor has proposed as well. And then for the school maintenance and operation portion is to limit state spending to 4%, right? Which GRR increased, the comptroller said earlier this week, by 8.1%. Take half of that, use it for spending on whatever you want, education, healthcare, so forth, and use the other 4% to buy down the school maintenance and operation property tax. That would be an 8% cut in the school maintenance and operation property tax. And we could eliminate the school maintenance and operation within about a decade. So I wonder, because one thing about it with the rollback, right, is that you don't necessarily lower property taxes.
No, you absolutely don't.
It slows the growth, which is good, right? That's a great step in the right direction. But how can we lower property taxes? Because whenever we talk to taxpayers across this great state, they're saying they want to pay lower property tax bills.
Well, the state's going to pay more, and it's going to be.
Right, no, and the state, and the commission report is that we pay more.
Yeah.
Okay? And we're looking at three sources of revenue for that. We're looking at general revenue. We're looking at basically the rainy day fund is effectively full. It's well over 12 billion. It's supposed to be over 15. And so that's an additional $3 billion. So we really have about $12 billion more coming in, not counting the difference in sales tax revenue as Representative Springer talked about with the Supreme Court decision. So we recognize that, and really our recommendation was to lower tax rates and to also do new programs, which include performance-based pay for districts and also performance-based pay for teachers. We need to give teachers a chance to make $92,000 like they're doing in Dallas. We don't want to have teachers just disappear into the administration because that's the only way they can make big money. Yeah. Okay? And big money being, $100,000. But so it's a great report. I want you, if you're interested, get online and read it because it contains a good blueprint to go forward with.
And I really commend y'all for what y'all are working on throughout the last, year and a half now?
Well, it seemed like it. It was just a year.
Okay,
But anyway.
all right. It's
But
been a
what
while,
we're talking about, though, is still spending more money.
Yeah.
Not spending less, spending more money.
Yeah.
Right. It's new money, but not raising tax rates. It's actually taking advantage of the obvious, which is we've got an incredible increase in production coming out of the Permian. We've got very strong sales tax numbers coming in, and we've got changes in law at the federal level.
So, Representative Springer, so what do you foresee? What's going to happen this session?
No, I think.
Oh, I'm interested in this.
Yeah.
This ought to be the good one. Hey, 8 times. No. I just got to stall for 1 minute. No, look, I love what Dennis Bonin has said, which is he doesn't have to have the answer. He just has to make sure we don't leave the room till we find that answer. And we are going to work with our partners in the Senate to come up with a solution that has a combination of property tax reform, which is appraisal districts, rollback elections, those, relief, which is finding ways that we switch some of our property tax over to consumption taxes. And we come up with something that works for all of us, that we can come back and know that we gave the citizens what they've really been asking for.
Yeah. Judge, what do you hope to see?
I hope to see us truly get back to the historical partnership that was set up 172 years ago, where instead of sitting on something and blaming one another, that we're truly getting together as the implementing and administering arm of the state and sitting down and talking about the way to most efficiently and effectively spend the tax dollars that the legislature decides that we need to spend on education, and on other areas of services that we're providing and that y'all are constitutionally required to spend throughout the deal. But we've got to recognize the difference from one county to the next, and there are tremendous differences between each one of the 254 counties.
I think I
Back
had
court.
that discussion on the front mic, back mic with one of your Tarrant County constituents yesterday.
I apologize for it.
So back
I
court,
can
real,
guess who it was.
real quick so we can get some Q&A.
What gets measured gets fixed. I'm going to quote the Dallas County judge who tried to cut his property tax rate because his taxes were up 7.2% and his wages were only up 2.7%. So he did his best to try to get the votes, but he only got one other vote. So he lost it. But even though taxes went up 3 times as fast as wages in Dallas County. When we talk about guidelines from the state, we've talked about the rollback rate and how it's at 8%. It's been that way since the early years, but it actually started out at 5% because the theory was that the good number, government shouldn't grow faster than 5% without the approval of the public. Whatever we do, I want to recognize that spending's the issue. And I also want to get everybody in the room involved on an election in November, whether it's for bond issues, whether it's for tax rate ratification elections, whether it's for rollback approvals, because we've got to get the public involved in voting because that's the ultimate local control. It's the individual voters that make those decisions. Thank you.
All right. John, you have one last word?
Yeah, I would like to see an efficient tax system. I'd like to see the rollback votes, and I'd like to see efficient spending of the revenue we raise. It's up for voters to decide how much we spend. I don't want to outcompete New York or California for being one on Brookings' spending list, though.
All right. Yes. Yeah, please give him a hand. So now we're going to turn it over to all of you. I know we're going to have a whole bunch of hands come up. So please turn your brief comment into a question. So we can have, so we can have a lot of questions here today. So let's start right there by you, Mary Catherine.
Thank you. A couple of
What's
things.
your name?
My name is Marion Knowlton. I'm from a small rural county south of San Antonio. And a couple of things. You said that all the counties in Texas share one structure, and that was a county judge and 4 county commissioners. But we also share appraisal districts and chief appraisers. Is there anything to be done? Because our appraisal districts spend a lot of money. Every time our board meets, we have an attorney fly down from Dallas at a very high cost to sit in on a meeting. My first question is...
We just have time for one question.
Okay, is there
There
any
you go.
thought to appraisal districts and any reform of that?
Appraisal districts.
Oh, yes, we've got, I mean, it's pages and pages of appraisal reform in SB2. You can go online and see it. We have to make sure that when people go to protest their value, they get treated well. I will tell you, we've had some horror stories that we've heard. We had somebody walk in to Harris County to protest the value of his car. He ended up in handcuffs, and just because he was filming something at the front counter. So we've heard it all, and I wish we'd have another hour. We could go into appraisal district reform because that's a big issue.
But Senator Betancourt says the right thing. We were very close last session, and bulk of it was on reform. So please read that. If there's something we missed, we always want to hear that feedback.
The Speaker had a great bill on transparency within the appraisal, and there's a lot of reform that needs to occur on appraisal boards.
All right. Good stuff. Right back here.
Thank you. Stephen Casey, live in Round Rock. Grew up in Houston. Question is this. If the sales tax is the most efficient, right, because more people move here to Texas than anybody place else, and so your tax base grows, your revenue goes up without having to change your rate, then why can't we get for school funding just a simple division problem instead of Robin Hood? Total amount of funds versus total amount of students, and allow those students to be efficient with portability of funds, and that way we're not doing Robin Hood, and then the funds are going where the most students are.
More of a student-centered instead of school district-centered funding?
Well, we've got slides on per capita, but we don't have time to go, or, individual student-based funding approach. We've been in recapture because the state's been in this litigation longer than anybody else. In fact, when we did the commission, we invited some national experts in because we're really worried about these trends on recapture, because there's problems with equity, and then also the type of money that some counties and areas like the one that she's from can generate. Because when the sales tax issue is, you have to decide, are you going to do point of sale, point of collection? And I can only imagine what the food fight would be is if we converted all 4,000 local taxing jurisdictions over to sales tax, because then we'd have to figure out how to divide up that pie, and that would make their legislative session pretty interesting. So we're looking at a combination of hybrid of all these things, and the bottom line is that I wanted you to see what the real spending was per student. Oh, can you flip back to that? Okay. All right, because this is important. No, not that. So that's the 60 billion.
Hopefully my 11,000's right.
Oh, well, stop. Okay. I do want to show this because this shows something to your ARBs. You've got real problems with appraisal review board independence and them listening to taxpayers, and quite frankly, people not falling asleep while they're doing it, okay? And you can see the difference between a Tyler with 6 people on it and a Harris County with 190. So the judge is right about that. There's a tremendous difference in size. But let's see if we can find the per capita school spending, because this is really important. No, it's not in there. Okay. Anyway, it's about 11,700. I'm going from memory. Yeah. And so to answer your question, you can change the mix, but you have to set up goals and top-down guidelines. We want performance-based funding. We want school districts that are doing well on administrative expenses to get rewarded for it. We want to see great programs like ACE, Promise, and P-TECH in Dallas spread all over the state, because you have to take best practices, recognize them, and send them everywhere, because that's the only way you cut cost, okay? Because our real problem in the budget is the explosion in health and human services, and that is, to quote Ross Perot, the giant sucking sound to the south that will take the entire budget. So I'm glad we're working on education now. We did a great bill on transportation, and I see the model that we might be able to use some excise tax, just like we're doing on transportation, to help buy down tax rates and give more money into the system for good programs. Yeah.
Just on the sales tax point, a consumption tax is theoretically more efficient than a property tax. A consumption tax that taxes 50% of business purchases, as the one in reality does, is not necessarily more efficient. And second, if you have a sales tax that surpasses 10%, you're going to start losing a lot of sales that just try to avoid the sale altogether. So we have to be careful on that.
No, because there wouldn't be any cars sold on the tech side of Texarkana. Okay?
But just remember that we've got $60 billion worth of exemptions right now in our sales and in our property tax as at the rates we're at right now.
That's correct.
There's $60 billion worth of tax that has been exempted or is not being paid.
But the
You know, my
majority of
favorite one of those is when I tell, hey, we could tax some things that aren't, is golf lessons aren't taxed.
Yeah.
well,
I
obviously,
mean, it should. I mean, and those are the decisions that we
Yeah.
have to make. Is do we reevaluate the fact that golf
That would be
lessons?
another
But
reason
the
for me never to do any more in golf.
Yeah.
Right, well,
Have you
I've cut my
seen the
taxes
average
already.
person play golf?
by the way, the majority of those exemptions are on the property side are ag for the rural counties. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, you can also limit spending, right?
Right.
The spending side of it, and
No,
kind of
and
look
I
at
tell you,
that.
Senator Hancock's had a great spending bill,
Yeah.
and we've had, whatever y'all think of whatever we've done in the state legislature, in the last 2 budget cycles, we limited our total growth
Yep.
to 3.8% in the first biennium and less than 1% in this last budget. So we've had 2 conservative budgets in a row. So I hope you keep telling everybody to go for a 3-peat, go for
Yes.
3, right? Are you with me?
Yeah,
3
yeah.
good conservative budgets?
That's part of the conservative Texas budget
and I
coalition.
really love that, but as the left hand has passed bills and left prisoners in our jails, the right, which has cost us more in county property tax, the right hand has complained about the facts that we're spending more in county property tax.
Judge, there's no fact in that statement that could possibly explain Harris County taking 51% more revenue in 4 years. There's not that many prisoners in the entire United States that
No,
can do
but
it, okay?
they would
So-
also be the 5th largest city if you took them and you know what? City services, there are things that cities do that counties don't. And
Okay.
you got 2 million people.
Judge, we've got limited purpose annexations out in the west side of Harris County where the city of Houston sucks the money out because they take half the money from with the MUDs on sales taxes. We're basically that part of the city is, well, the extraterritorial part of it is subsidizing the people that are subsidizing the budget spenders, and that's the problem at the city. It's their budget spending.
And it doesn't speak to the whole thing, but there is some honesty though in there, and I try to work with all 22 of my county judges because spending more money in mental health, but when we leave prisoners, and I have this happen in my counties, mental health because they can't stand competency, spending 6 months in jail to get a competency to get mental health services so they can stand trial is a bigger waste of taxpayer dollars than spending the mental health in the first place.
Hey, we've been doing a lot about criminal justice reform too. That's what we're working on a lot.
And if Chairman Nelson was here, you
let's
would hear how much we've spent $7 billion more on mental health too.
All right, let's
Okay?
get another question. This is
Hi,
good discussion.
Hello, my name's Jamie Melendez, and I am a public school teacher in Hidalgo County, which is in the city of Hidalgo, which is a bordering city, bordering the U.S.-Mexico border. And I keep hearing about school choice and raising, and I'm one of the few teachers that is for school choice. I think that a parent should be able to decide whether their child goes to a public school, a parochial school, or a charter school. But all of them should be treated the same way. As far as expectations, I'm a reading specialist, and a lot of my students that I actually assist and help out come from charter schools that were kicked out because they didn't want to bother with them. But my question is again, we're the highest taxed one of the poorest and highest taxed, and I keep hearing about the Robin Hood, and I would actually like to see the state representatives and senators work towards not giving so much money. You know, my district's next to La Jolla.
By the way, La Jolla, you're La Jolla, right?
No, I'm in Valley
Next
View.
door, I think she said.
All right, now,
I'm next to La Jolla, and as a teacher, I was appalled to learn that they had a water park.
Right.
by the way,
They
That
had a
was
golf
bad.
cart.
now, I want her to
And
say this
what
again.
gives
Ma'am,
you-
if you could you say this again? There is an independent school district in Texas that has used their recapture money to buy what again?
A golf course and a water park.
Right, they had the water park.
Yeah.
And now they're buying a golf course.
No, they already had a golf course.
Yeah, now, right, now.
Yeah.
And what are they buying next?
Golf course, water park. I don't know. I can't remember right now.
Okay, but
It's
that-
crazy. I'm like,
Would you please ask the
this
question?
money should be
Well,
going
that's
into.
recapture. That's why recapture has to be frozen or stopped because
All right.
So,
La Jolla
my
is
question is, are you
is
going
the
to be?
textbook case for it.
Yes. My question again is like, are you going to be working to solving this issue? Because as a teacher, as a public school teacher, I'm appalled, and I have a home, and I see my students and their families struggling to pay their property taxes,
Yep.
and all the bonds that are passed in
And
our
please,
cities.
please ask a question. We got to move on.
Well,
Is that the question? What are we going to do about Robin
Yes,
Hood?
yes,
Are
we're gonna
you
do
going to be
We're gonna
working
work tonight.
towards maybe not making regulations that stops school districts from spending money on?
Yes, we're going to have a bill that stops school districts from buying water parks and golf courses. I
Thank
guarantee
you.
that.
All right. Let's see. Who
And
do you want
guys,
next,
I
Mary
want that
Catherine?
bill filed by Monday. Okay, Don, you got it?
There we go. All right, here we got a question right over here.
So,
Then we'll come over here. Sue.
so obviously, with the understanding that taxation is theft to begin with, what is the argument against rollback rates being lowered? Because representatives and senators love us to vote them into office, but they don't love us to vote for our own tax increases. So, what is the
Let
argument against
Let
that?
Judge Whitley make the response.
Again, I think you've got things like economic downturns, you've got Harvey, you've got a lot of different stuff. And what you're trying to do, we've talked about some exceptions today. We've talked about some abuses. It should be up to, and I think that occurs in less than 5% of the cities and counties and schools around this state. And that's what the voters should be able to take care of instead of trying to take a single brush and paint the whole state with that same single brush.
Okay, let me do the counter. Any bill.
A year ago.
Any bill that has been filed, both the House version and the Senate version, had disaster emergency declaration and help for a Harvey situation. That's typical disinformation that's out there. The other thing is that we also have exclusions in the code for first-time construction, new construction, homestead exemptions, and indigent defense. Now, Representative Stringer and I were at a meeting today where we're going to be looking at not only that, but some child protective services and expanding that, because you don't want the small rural counties picking up whatever the problems are that get sent to them by the state. But the bottom line is that we've got to have guidelines that force the last equation. As values go up, tax rates have got to come down. The existing rollback rate is too high. That's why tax bills continue to rise and will until we can get that rollback rate lowered. We can do sales tax, we can move some sales tax back and forth, but we have to say that if you exceed a rollback rate, which the governor has the plan at 2.5, and I've supported that on the commission, the Senate plan was 4, the House plan was 6. All these numbers are lower than 8, and they need to be, and the lower they go, the better off taxpayers will be.
Well, and Senator, I heard in your discussion, one of the other things I think that's a great misnomer is we say, well, we were below the rollback and we were at 7.5%. But if you look, they grew at 13%, 14%, because of all the other exclusions. And we've seen ones that have grown at 13, 14% year over year over year. And as somebody, I think it was from the Baker Institute, sort of said, at what point do we get efficiencies in scale? We still only have one county judge in these counties that are growing. And so where do you have that in that aspect?
Yep. All right, last question. Please make it short.
I will.
Sue.
Sue
All right, thank you.
Evenwell from Titus County in Northeast Texas. I kind of hate to bring this up, but I enjoy all the new industry that's moving into Texas. But at the same time, our education, our health and human services they have to go up. I mean, we're going to be spending more. And yet we give tax abatements for 25 years to these large corporations. You talk about exemptions. I mean, I'd love to have a 25-year tax abatement too.
Did you happen to read my Statesman piece last week?
I want to make a couple.
That
I mean, first off,
Apple. But what about tax abatements?
We have never given a tax abatement that's been longer than 10 years, and it's usually 50% and not a full amount, because we recognize that there's still certain services we have to provide. School districts are not allowed to do abatements. So, you know, that's one other thing to look at from that perspective.
They do have 312s though, so right.
313 on the
Sorry,
schools.
right, that's right. Now, let's try to just go to one point that I hope everybody here can agree. In the testimony we took around the state, for the first time that we know of, a major company, Dow Chemical, took a $2 billion plant. Instead of putting it in Texas, they put it in Baton Rouge. Their number one problem was tax policy, because they pay $1 less there on tax than they do here. And that's like $20 billion over the life of the plant. Mm-hmm. You've got to understand that the job cycle that makes Texas the important job creation engine for the nation, we can't do anything to interrupt that. Because if we do, that cuts off our growth. Well, Judge Whitley and I can argue about how much is how much, you know, but so just understand, that's why I like the idea as values go up and rates come down, because everybody benefits. Because you pay about, in some counties, well, it's pretty close to this, you pay about half where you live and half where you work, okay? Because all these are all indirect taxes. They all come back to you somehow. Yeah. So I just strongly say, just remember, Texas business is the envy of the nation, and let's keep it that way, because jobs are the lifeblood of the Texas economy.
Let's not screw that up.
Right. Well, I think that's a great way to end it, because the Texas model is one that we need to strengthen, right? Low taxes. We need spending relief in the process. Can't get away from that. Please go to our website, check out the lower property taxes sort of tool that we have there. Thank you all. Please give them a round of applause if I can talk.